views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening. Welcome to BronxTalk. We are, as we have been for the past few weeks, doing programs from our homes on BronxNet television, and this is no exception. But we have a very important charge, and that is to keep people of the Bronx informed about what's going on during these very difficult times. One of the aspects of life that has been greatly affected and probably will be affected by the coronavirus and the pandemic that's sweeping across the world is the not-for-profit world. And I think in many ways, even though not-for-profits in the Bronx have tremendous effect on life in the Bronx, in many ways, they're underappreciated. I think people take them for granted. But right now, that fickle finger fate of Target is right at not-for-profits, because even maybe more so than some businesses, it's going to be very difficult for them to restart and find sources of funding. So what we thought we'd do is talk about not-for-profits in the Bronx and their future in the aftermath of this coronavirus. And so we brought on two experts who work very closely with not-for-profits. We'll start off with Anat Gerstein from Anat Gerstein Incorporated. Nice to have you with us, Anat. Nice to see you. Hope you're well and healthy during this very difficult time.
Doing about as well as everyone can. Thank you.
And just for people who don't know, Anat Gerstein for many years has specialized in promoting not-for-profits. I could list the prominent Bronx ones that you work with, and so I guess it's Wedco and let's see, Bronx Works also you work with, and over the course of the program we can even talk about more of them. Also, I want to welcome in Enrique Virgil, who's the Chief Financial Officer for the Mosholu Montefiore Community Center. Enrique, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us, I guess from your home. Everybody is in their homes.
Yes, at home, trying to stay safe throughout this madness.
It's madness, and it's challenging. Let's get right to it then. Anat, let's talk about the campaign. You decided to start a hashtag Support Nonprofits campaign. Tell me why you started this campaign and what the idea is and what your hopes are for it.
Sure. So, nonprofits always operate on the margins, some more than others, but about 3/4 of nonprofits only have 6 months worth of revenue to sustain themselves. And actually 1 out of 5 can only sustain themselves for a month. Given what's going on in the economy, given what stresses the government sector is on, we started the campaign to encourage regular people to give what they can, to give funding, to give supplies, and to volunteer their time to help nonprofits through this. Many nonprofits are first-line responders, and others are just providing us with great content and information, educational and entertaining in our homes. And we need to support all of them. Otherwise, they really are at risk, and a lot of them might disappear after this crisis.
What have you, be as specific as you want to be, what have you heard from not-for-profits about, I guess, going into this challenge? Some have closed temporarily, and some are in operation. We're going to talk about Marshal Montefiore and the great work that they're doing right now. But give us some on-the-ground, firsthand impressions that you've gotten.
Sure. Well, first of all, nonprofits that are still operating are increasingly struggling. First of all, they have added expenses. even just the expense alone of cleaning and providing cleaning supplies and cleaning crews to maintain their sites and safety, the amount of money that they need to spend on personal protective equipment to the extent that they could find it. So nonprofits are faced with increased costs, the ones that are operating, and certainly uncertainty about some of their contracts, given what's happening with government funding. Other nonprofits, actually those and others, have had to cancel their galas. So organizations that rely on private support to fund some of their programming and, overhead, government contracts provide for very little overhead. So if you want to keep the lights on and you want to have basic resources, a lot of nonprofits rely on private donations through their galas, and those galas have been canceled. Nonprofits are trying to move those galas online, and I think some of them are having some success. I think people are in a giving mood. People remember the 2008 fiscal crisis. I mean, it literally feels like it happened yesterday. So I think, there is an interest among private donors, even corporations and foundations, to support organizations.
You mentioned the galas. I know of one not-for-profit that has generally a very big summer gala, and they probably base their entire year's budget around what they're going to take, and they have a target, and they're very good at raising that amount of money, and they've been doing it for a number of years. And recently the dialogue has been, gee, I guess we have to cancel it for this summer because now is the time that they would be getting people to make the donation. But then what do they do? This is I had even said, gee, how you can't possibly run this event. How are you going to do it? And the response I got back, we have to do something, because if we don't, I don't know that we can continue to survive. I guess you hear this very often.
100%. First of all, let me say that every nonprofit has to be out there talking to their donors, talking to their supporters, communicating about what they're doing and how they're getting by in an effort to continue to raise money. No nonprofit could afford to take this time to sit idly by and hope or wait until this passes. Nonprofits that have to cancel their galas have to come up with a different strategy. So a lot of my clients and a lot of other nonprofits are going digital. People are getting creative with what that means and how they're going to raise money in with a digital gala, and how they're going to get people to log on. Although I would have to say that because we're all stuck at home, logging on today isn't like it was a month ago when we were all busy at work. So I think there is interest, there is possibility, but there's absolutely 100% a need to keep going and finding ways around the situation.
Certainly, you're preaching to the choir. Here we are on television from a room in my apartment. So I mean that's the way it goes. Anyway, let's bring Enrique Virgil from Mosholu Montefiore Community Center in. One of the things that Anat mentioned was, organizations that have had to shut down. Mosholu Montefiore, almost from the beginning of this crisis, said, well, we're staying open. Obviously they're not running their normal activities, but they're doing a number of important services for the local community. Talk a little bit about what you've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have, out of the main building next to Montefiore Hospital, we do have our food pantry going on, where we're doing daily distributions out to the community. And because of everything, the need really has multiplied. We have a line out the door on a daily basis, whereas we were doing pantry distributions on Tuesdays and Thursdays only. Also in the Edenwald Project housing complex, we also have a food pantry going on in there. And we have lines out the door every single morning waiting for food and basic necessities.
There was a photograph which we're going to show that was like an overhead shot of the line that went like literally all the way around the block. Of course, the line is extended because everybody is at least 6 feet apart. But in terms of operating that, I guess there's two things that come to mind right away. Number one is getting the goods in. I mean, it's easy to say we have a food pantry, but you've got to get that from somewhere, which of course for you as a chief financial officer is important because that's a purchasing thing. And number two, you've got to have it staffed. So let's first start with your part of it. You're actually purchasing goods and food supplies. You're getting donations. Talk about how that's going to work. Well, that is.
Yeah. So, so we have gotten some contributions from our usual, corporate donors. But for the most part, we've been buying a lot of the products ourselves. We also have DIFTA funding that takes care of, the Meals on Wheels for the seniors, and they deliver the food directly to the constituents. But
Enrique, let me just interject about that. So what you're doing in that case is you're getting that funding anyway to providing meals for seniors and those kinds of things, and you're just smart enough and have enough of an infrastructure to be able to translate that to do a different kind of purchasing than for afternoon lunch meals and things like that.
Well, right. So we have multiple revenue streams for food in general. So DIFTA, we're giving it directly to the seniors, but then we're coming out of pocket with a lot of the food costs for both pantries that we have going on, because the need is so great. So we're willing to dole out the money because of the need in the community.
Go ahead. Sure. Go ahead. Continue.
Sorry. And in turn, it's also a way for us to keep staff on board and not have to lay off so many people.
Because that expenditure comes out of a similar kind of funding.
Right.
And then let's talk about staff. I mean, the PPE question is universal right now. You're making sure, just tell me about how you've been able to deal with it. I mean, it's a challenge, I'm sure, every minute of every day.
Yeah, it's a huge struggle and something that we're going through right now, because we just don't have sufficient PPE. Staff is just spending the whole day with a mask on or the same set of gloves. We're trying to be as efficient as possible. We're also, procuring gloves and masks out there. Problem is, it's just hard to find right now. When the hospitals themselves are struggling to find this same equipment, we're not going to have much luck. So, we're reaching out to our politicians. We're reaching out to government, city and state funding sources. We're reaching out to everyone to see what we can get. It's bare bones what we're getting, understandably so, because the greatest need is in the hospitals. But, I won't lie to you, our staff, it is a concern for our staff, protecting themselves, making sure that they're not going home and bringing anything with them.
Yes, of course. And, we talk about our first responders, obviously people in healthcare and police and fire and other people. But, I see people in grocery stores and I see people like people on Mosholu Montefiore staff, no less brave, no less giving about themselves and their time. And they deserve a lot of credit. I want to bounce off something that you suggested and get back to Anat Gerstein and in a way advice, I guess, for not-for-profits, and that's multi-sources of funding. I know Anat, a lot of the larger organizations, the ones that you represent all the time, the only way they can survive, much like Mosholu Montefiore, is with multiple sources of funding. So I guess maybe you can address that a little bit in terms of advice for even smaller not-for-profits to say, well, our whole grant comes from the state. Maybe now is the time to look at a different alignment of your funding stream.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I think it's actually a lesson that a lot of nonprofits learned from the 2008 crisis. Nonprofits that relied very heavily on government contracts understood after that they needed to diversify their funding. I think that they just need to keep doing that and working on it, and to keep up, their current funding streams to the extent that they can. Of course, there's a lot of challenges in doing that because, as I said, of the budgets, but they just need to keep communicating with their funders and looking for new funders and looking for new funding sources. There are some federal, COVID stimulus programs that every nonprofit should be looking to apply for. The payroll protection program that should be out eventually. Some kinks in the process of rolling it out, but that could provide with nonprofits with significant sources of cash to kind of get over this hopefully not too long standing hump. Yeah.
You mentioned this now for the second time, and I want to underscore it, and that is the idea of communicating with funders. Normally you say, well, we do it when we run our gala, or we do it when we, like for Marshal Montefiore, they'll open up a little league or something like that, and then all of a sudden they go out and they start doing it. This idea of communication, which of course you're a specialist in, needs to be happening right now, anticipating that in the future you're going to need to be able to call them. And if you wait for the last minute, they're going to be, whoever the funders are going to be inundated.
Right. I mean, nonprofits have to stay top of mind with all of their funders. And what we're suggesting to nonprofits and what we're doing with our clients is helping them communicate on a regular basis. I think one email a week to your support base is not too much these days to say, this is what we're doing. This is how this week is going. Look at this photo of our employee doing X, Y, or Z. Getting on social media, sharing information with your funders, tagging the electeds that support you. All of that is so important right now, and every nonprofit really needs to be doing it to the extent that they can. I know some nonprofits are challenged because they're not doing work on the ground, and so they don't have any on the ground pictures. But if they've taken their programs digitally, then they could be sharing, photos from that. But communicating with your donors is just critically important today, because you want to be top of mind as they're making tough funding decisions. And as we start to recover, it'll be important too. And I would like to just, Gary, mention that with our Support Nonprofits campaign, any nonprofit, it's not just for our clients, it's literally for every nonprofit out there. They can be involved in our campaign. They could, first of all, be just using the hashtag support nonprofits, but they could also send us contact directly. Our website is anatgerstein.com, and they could be, they can find our contact information through our website, and they could be sending us content for the campaign that we will be happy to push out. Photos of workers responding to the corona crisis, content about what they're doing, short content because it's a social media campaign. But we are more than happy to promote the work of the entire sector and help the entire sector get through this.
Enrique, let's talk about Mosholu Montefiore's funding. Let's go through it. Some of them are self-funded. Day Camp in part is self-funded. There are little leagues. The programs much better than I do, but there's adult programs, there's after-school programs, there's senior citizen programs. Does each program have its own funding source? And I know it's very complex, and you spend your full-time job doing it. But explain to me, from the CFO's point of view, how the whole thing works, so that a very complex and large organization can function.
Right. So our after-school programs and even our senior center programs, for the most part, they're funded by New York City. Then we also do have adult programs funded by the state. We have a tax program, which was actually pretty heavy going on now, where we do the annual tax filings, which is kind of in disarray now. We're trying to do it over the phone, do it, remotely. We have federal Head Start as well. We have UPK through DOE, through New York City. So we have several different funding sources. However, right now, because of the crisis, we're really going to, I would say plan B or C, but it's plan GHIJ right now. Where we're trying to provide remote services where, a lot of our constituents, they need that human contact. They need to, be with that full-time staff member or that part-time staff member. Because we do have people that come from broken homes, they come from all walks of life. And so our primary concern really, a lot of us were putting our social worker hat on and making sure that their daily needs are being met beyond just providing the programmatic services. And a lot of it is really coming up with approved plans that the funders would also, continue funding, because we rely on 85% city funding, let alone government funding. And so without that funding, we have to do massive layoffs or furloughs.
Well, furloughs, and then of course cutting, life-giving programs, which really would be
Right.
terrible. Do you have in your mind what sources of funding are you most concerned about, or list them all? We're concerned about everything.
Well, if I were to be here to list them all, we would be here until tomorrow. But no, in general, the biggest concern is the deficit that the city and the state are facing because of this disaster. De Blasio was on air last week talking about a $1.2 billion. Now there are rumors circulating that it's a $2 billion deficit. So, our concern is, okay, well, that deficit needs to be made up somewhere. So where is that going to be, and what programs will that impact? There are rumors flying around it's going to affect program X, Y, and Z. We're trying not to pay too much mind to the rumors, because if you listen to every rumor that comes across your desk, you're not going to sleep at night. But it is a legitimate concern, and a very, very real concern, because there is some truth to some of those rumors.
Yeah, unfortunately there is. We tried to do a little research to count the number of not-for-profits in the Bronx. I had found a number a few years ago that said there were 1,200. I think we just looked now and said there was somewhere between 700 and 4,500. So we don't really know. I'm going to just give you both and to the audience a little anecdote that I remember when I talk about the creation of the modern day Bronx not-for-profit. Many years ago, I guess it was the late 90s, when Freddie Ferrer was the borough president. And I've told this story a number of times. He ran a press conference right under the L at the 161st Street outside Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium. And he had a big sign, and the sign said, "Don't dump on the Bronx." And at that moment, it was a flag in the ground that the people of the Bronx were saying, you know what? We're not getting it from anywhere else. We're not, we've got to do it ourselves. And in my mind, that was the beginning of a whole era, of a whole new generation of not-for-profits. You could start with Nos Quedamos and many of the other not-for-profits that grew up to establish a Bronx identity, which really went through, in my mind, the not-for-profit world. And that's why it's so important. Listen, I'm sure the people of Brooklyn and Queens and Manhattan are doing very well, but that's why, to me, this whole notion of not-for-profits is so important, because the people of the Bronx don't wait for other people. We want to do it ourselves, which brings me to the next question, Anat, about the size of the organizations. Now, Mosholu Montefiore is a pretty good-sized organizations, the two that I mentioned that you work with. But let's talk about small not-for-profits, people who have started. I know a woman that runs a wonderful not-for-profit in the Norwich section of the Bronx, which tutors young people, etc. She has got to be concerned about the kinds of funding. Is there specific advice for smaller not-for-profits, or is it really all part of the same thing?
There isn't specific guidance for smaller nonprofits, but they are in much more potential trouble because they have a lot less cash on hand to continue operations. A lot of the contracts that they might be working on only pay you for delivering service. And though government has said that they'll continue to honor those contracts, even though you can't deliver service because we can't be delivering in-person service anymore, there is that concern too. They just need to be out there. They need to spend this time while they're not able to provide service, really retooling their communications. Obviously, smaller nonprofits have fewer communications channels. Their websites might not be as up to date, although that's not true for all small nonprofits. Some small nonprofits have amazing communications. But if you're looking at your website and you're saying, you know what, I got to improve this, do it now. If you're looking at your email communications and you're thinking, maybe I should upgrade this, do it now. If you've got social media channels that aren't active, get them active now. That's what every nonprofit should be doing.
This is very sage advice. I know I appreciate it, and I'm sure other people in not-for-profits appreciate it. Enrique, let's just get the final words from you then, and then Anat, we'll get back to you and have you deliver a summary, and we'll talk about the Support Nonprofits campaign. I guess Mosholu Montefiore is completely committed to whatever the service they can do right now. And that's going to continue, right? There's no plans to stop it.
Absolutely. We're 100% committed. We're actually planning on, God willing, everything work out, especially with our funders. But we're even willing this month, we're planning on bringing back our part-timers. Our part-timers have not been working for the most part for the past 2 weeks because of the, suspension and cancellation of programs. We have almost 700 part-timers that are not working right now. And our goal, our biggest goal right now is to bring them all back, because these are people that, despite being part-timers, the heads of households, they provide very, very key and important income in their homes.
Wow. I don't know how you're going to do it. To me, it's a miracle. It's even a miracle that you're thinking of that, because so many people are laid off. But I know for 70 years, MMCC has been an organization that cares. Enrique Virgil, thank you so much for joining us. And thank all my buddies over there at the MMCC for everything they have done. Listen, I went to day camp there, so my heart, where my heart is.
Yes.
as did my kids and Coach Little League and everything. But you're literally saving the world. And Anat, let's give you the final word, and let's put out the hashtag support nonprofits campaign once again. The financial gifts, get people to volunteer, encourage contributions. Why don't you summarize the program and just talk about the importance of that commitment?
Well, I think you just heard about the importance of that commitment from Enrique's interview. I mean, look what MMCC is doing. And there's so many other organizations across the city and across the state and the country that are, going to work, taking care of people. We need to support them because they are doing some of the most important work now. There's all this coverage about people working in hospitals, and God bless every single one of them for going to work every day and taking care of our neighbors and our family members, and maybe even one of us. But nonprofits are doing the same, and we need to support them. So, for everybody listening, to this show, watching the show, everybody out there, go out there, support a nonprofit that you love, find a new one to support that's doing great work right now. Share your support online, use the hashtag support nonprofits, and for all the nonprofits out there that are doing great work, send us your content. We're going to push it out and hopefully get you some support.
Great. And we do that through anatgerstein.com, right?
Yep. You can send us information about your work through anatgerstein.com. You can find our contact information. You can, go on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and follow Support Nonprofits. And just get out there. And if you're an individual, give as much as you can and give whatever you can.
Or volunteer.
Yes, there are plenty of online volunteer opportunities. There are homebound seniors who just need a call from a friendly voice once a day. There's a lot of things.
I'm sure our friends at MMCC could help coordinate that. And so, Enrique, it's mmcc.org. And let's get everybody to support non-for-profits. I believe, as I expressed earlier in the program, this is the heart and soul of the Bronx, and we got to do it ourselves. And that's why we have all these great non-for-profits. So Anat Gerstein and Enrique Virgil, thank you both so much for joining us. Folks, we will be back next week. We're going to talk about remote learning and how is that going. We will have an educator and a parent to weigh in on that. We want to thank our producer is Helen Greenberg. And normally I thank the director, but there's no director. We're just, I guess we have to thank Google Hangout, but also to BronxNet Television for making it possible for us to just continue right along. And we will see you next week. Good night.